A major sensation, the Sheldon edition provoked endless columns. Some blasted its biased perspective. Others hailed its high moral tone. Still others wondered if it was really a newspaper. Nevertheless, the effort crystallized the late 19th century debate over the relationship between religion and news, demonstrating how much had changed since Puritans reported evidence of God's hand in daily occurrences. Sheldon's experiment could not overcome the secularist tide in news coverage and in the journalism profession more generally. Journalists began starting schools, journalism schools, in the beginning of the 20th century and promulgating journalism credos. People talked about journalism as if it was a profession in which truth and God's word could be revealed through accurate reporting. In fact, some schools often refer to the journalist credo or the church of journalism. There was a self-conscious movement to adopt religious rhetoric to explain the vocation. Oftentimes, papers had started religion sections where they could include church news and religious advertisements, but this was almost a way to have a place where this kind of news could congregate rather than on page one. Between 1870 and 1930, changes in the news business, including the growing importance of advertising and the need to reach an even more diverse readership, further hurt any thought of a Christian perspective in the news. Writing in 1933, one researcher noted, quote, "The shift from biblical authority and sanctions to scientific and factual authority and sanctions in the news." Numbers also tell the story. Between 1905 and 1909, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature listed 21 stories per year on religion. That number dropped to 10 per year in 1930. Similarly, in 1905, 78% of stories were positively inclined to traditional Christianity, but by 1931, only 33% were similarly predisposed. Among elite publications, the percentage of positive religion stories dipped from 57% in 1912 to 18% in 1930. Similar trends occurred in the New York Times. Changing opinions were evident in editorials about the growing clash between religion and science. Initially, the Times sided with religion, opposing attempts to jettison traditional orthodoxies for modern science. But the paper's position shifted, and by 1900, the Times advocated for a vision of religion as a social force for good and against the conservative campaign for theological rectitude. During the 20s, the Times, like many American newspapers, weighed in on the conflict between religion and science that in 1925 coalesced around the teaching of evolution, specifically the state of Tennessee's legal suit against John Scopes. Although its news pages strove for objectivity, the Times' opinion columns aligned with the forces of science and modernity. Editorials claimed that fundamentalist religion was symptomatic of, quote, an ill-balanced mind, and feared its practitioners made America look foolish to the rest of the world. The Times editors, like many journalism professionals, believed that they had eclipsed religion as society's authoritative truth-teller and interpreter of events. This led to, I would suggest, a subtle bias in the way newspapers continued to cover religion, because in this ideological battle for control of the American psyche, newspapers were trying to let the public know, trust us, don't trust those religious nut jobs. And wouldn't you know, during those interwar years, newspapers covered what they called kooks and spooks, the newspaper terms for religious oddballs and eccentrics, even more than they covered institutional religions. Reporters were interested in colorful leaders, swamis and yogis, faith healers and holy rollers, Catholic crusaders and Protestant moralists, Daddy Grace and Father Coughlin, Sister Amy and Dorothy Day. These men and women were newsworthy insofar as they did the unexpected, whether it was scandalous, criminal, or extraordinary. Some confronted powerful politicians, others rallied thousands, still others healed through the power of faith. Papers also did cover religious issues that reflected community interests, such as religious outreach during the Great Depression and the debate over religious pacifism as World War II began. Yet the press's focus on religion news, either as what religious leaders did or what religious fanatics believed, made it possible to miss two of the 20th century's most significant religion stories: the destruction of European Jewry and the morality of the atom bomb. The press's decision to downplay the extermination of 8 million Jews has been explored by many scholars. There are many explanations, including that the victims belonged to a minority faith. In the calculus of news coverage, already stretched by a world war, the fate of a faraway non-Christian community did not seem that compelling. Similarly, the morality of using the atomic bomb, a decision that would seem to be an apt topic for religious leaders, was not part of the press mix. Rather, the attacks against Hiroshima and Nagasaki were evaluated wholly within the context of ending the war. It would be several years before the ethics of that momentous choice became a topic of public conversation, as would the Holocaust. It would take a while to catch up. By the end of the war, in the century's midpoint, coverage of religion reflected a new synthesis of the sacred and the secular. The right kind of religion was as American as apple pie, and the post-war suburban dream featured a white picket fence, a happy homemaker, and a Sunday benediction. Coexisting within that realm was the workaday world, ever more bound to belief in science, technology, and progress. Religion provided the moral and spiritual underpinning for a progressive vision of the future. And by 1950, the need for a religion beat was apparent to many editors. Religious leaders were quoted on the issues of the day, especially when they echoed a growing national consensus about America's political and economic leadership in a new world order that was rooted in her providential destiny. It wasn't only the mainstream religions that received press attention. Holy rollers, too, made a comeback. In 1949, press czar William Randolph Hearst ordered his Los Angeles newspaper to puff Graham, a decision that made the evangelical youth leader Billy Graham into a national star. Over the next 50 years, evangelicalism would increasingly claim column inches. Its renaissance, in a world where science and technology proved incapable of providing global panaceas, was yet another example of how the news made religion just as religion made the news, and both helped to make America. I want to stop there, 60 years out, since that's safely in the realm of history. And so I can talk about it authoritatively, because hopefully not many of you remember it all that well. But I want to invite you to continue this conversation with me, whether we discuss history or whether we venture into the present. I do feel it's important to understand what went before we talk now, and I think this ongoing interrelationship between religion and the news is not widely understood, nor is this sort of silent ideological contest between religion and the news that began in the 20th century for an authoritative place in the American psyche. Among the topics I've left out here is the rise of the religious right and the press's role in making that happen, the current upsurge in the coverage of religion and politics, and the state of religion reporting today. So I appreciate you all for hanging in there with me, and I look forward to hearing your comments and questions.